Let's take a look at project 6 from Algebra 2B. This is part 2 of the project. So we're continuing with Pauli and Digit's height measurement data. So it says following is the frequency chart of Pauli and Digit's data from the Northern Districts with height measured in feet. We need to figure out which box and whisker plot accurately describes the data from the surveys and which statement about the data is completely true. So first of all, let's just label whose is whose. This is going to be Pauli's data, and this is going to be Digit's data over here. So our box and whisker plot. Let's just kind of consider the bones of the box and whisker plot. So first of all, consider the range. Consider the range of the numbers. If we look at Pauli, we see that the lower range starts at 0.5 and it ends at 10. So if I was looking at, and I'll kind of draw just roughly, you have this number line and it starts at 1, I think there's a tick mark for 0, and then it goes all the way up to 10. We'll say 5 is somewhere around here. So if I'm looking at Pauli's data, if I'm just looking at the range, I know that it goes from 0.5, so that would be right about there. It goes from 0.5 all the way up to 10. So you would see, right, you would see this line going like this. And then for Digit, notice that Digits is going to be slightly different, and why is that? Well, because the frequency on the height 0.5, that frequency was 0, so that's not really going to be part of our range. So Digits' range would start at 1, but it also does go all the way up to 10. Right? So Digits' range is going to be a little bit smaller than Pauli's. That's one thing to consider. And I'm going to leave the rest of it up to you. Important to note would be the median. So that's the next piece that I would work on filling in. So I've already kind of started this plot for you. The next thing you need to look at is the median. From here, if you're doing this on scratch paper, what I would do is go back. In part 1 of this project, you had to record the median for each of these sets of data. So what I would do, again, is just go back, look at the median for each, and then plot that on your box, and take it from there. And I think, without overcomplicating this, I think you might be able to kind of get an idea of what your answer choice is going to be from that alone. Of course, you have to consider the spread of data and standard deviation as far as the actual box sizes go. But hopefully this is enough to get you started. And then part B will be which statement is completely true. I would just take the completely as a hint, so chances are each of the statements is going to be mostly correct, but there's only going to be one answer where everything mentioned is completely correct. These answer stems ask questions about right-skewed distribution or left-skewed distribution. Remember that if I'm looking at, I'll just draw it. As you know, and this is going to be an incorrect box, but I'm just going to show it to give you an idea. Something that had a box like this and the median like that. Notice that this middle line is cutting this exactly in half. That's when we know we would have a symmetric distribution, right? Whereas if the box looked either like this or like this, that would tell us about left-skewed or right-skewed distribution, okay? And you'll be able to figure out what you have based on once you're able to select that correct box and whisker plot, right? Then you'll be able to use that exact, the data from that plot to answer part B. So double check your work on part A because part B will kind of hinge on you being correct on the first part. Next, consider your answer from the previous question about the shape, center, and spread of the data. Briefly describe the differences and similarities between these two quantities in the two surveys. I would just refer back to question 1 and kind of discuss the box and whisker plot. Use that as your guideline as far as describing the surveys. The range isn't as critical. Although the ranges of the two surveys is slightly different, I would, again, as they've said, I would focus on the center. Okay, where's the median? What's the standard deviation? What's the mean? And fact, let's write that down. Talk about standard deviation, median, and, don't even worry about mean. Just focus on the standard deviation and the median. Maybe the mean will also come into play if you want to discuss that. But to get your juices going, start by talking about these two pieces and just see where it takes you. And again, remember describing the differences and similarities between these two quantities in the survey using the last question in the project as a reference point. Question 3. After seeing the box and whisker plots in the previous question, Polly now understands the shape, center, and spread of the data from the surveys. She combines the results, and now we have these two visual displays that depict our data. So we have the plot, which you were just working with, the box plot, and then we have a standard bar graph to look at. So based on these, it says which statement accurately describes the shape, center, and spread. And this is a multiple choice question. So the first thing you'll want to note is the shape of the data roughly symmetric, or is it left skewed or right skewed? So something, and in fact what I would do, and let's go ahead and do that, let's kind of just draw, I'm going to leave out the outliers, let's kind of draw a triangle around this. Let's see. So using straight lines, if I can draw them, that. So would you call that roughly symmetric, or would you call that right skewed or left skewed? I would say symmetric would be, perfect, and then we could have something like right skewed might look like that, left skewed might look something like that, right? So what do you think this figure most closely resembles? Would you say it's roughly symmetric? Would you say it's right skewed, or would you say it's left skewed? They'll also ask you where the peak occurs, the peak of course being the highest part of the bar graph. So it looks like that's this point right here. So what is the value on the number line for that peak? And then it's asking you what data will best describe it. Pay attention to this. So what are these symbols? What do they mean? That should be a really big clue as far as selecting the second half of the answer, whether it's best described by mean, by median, by range, by standard deviation. Again, I would just use this little key here as a clue as far as that part of the answer. And that is it for this part of the project. I will see you guys on the next video.